Hello and welcome back to the Build Propulsion Lab here at Community Over Code in Denver. And with me is Bob Paulin. Bob, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. My name is Bob Paulin. I'm a developer at Datavolo, which is my first real job after about 10 years of being an independent consultant. I'm an Apache Software Foundation member. I'm actually the VP of fundraising here. So I'm actually going to be giving a talk on that later today. But I'm a Java champion. I help run the Chicago Java user group, and I also run a podcast, Java Off Heap, and Java Pub House with Gibby, Michael Manella, and Josh Juneau.
Yeah, so check out all of those things actually, right? How to donate to the ASF,
Yep.
and your podcast and everything else, right?
Yep.
So great. So today we're going to talk a little bit about using Python with Java.
Yeah, so I mean, as I said, I'm a Java champion. But earlier this year, I was looking at getting back into AI. So I mean, I did a long time ago. I did my master's at DePaul and focused on AI. And it was interesting at the time, 20 years ago, you started to see a lot of the neural network stuff come up. And how those were able to do things with vision models and start to interpret words and do OCR. And it's, it was mostly just parlor tricks for AI back when I was getting my master's. And now here we're like in 2024, and you can kind of do a lot more now. So, looking at what LLMs have done to the industry and looking at how the AI in everyday developer usage has increased, I was kind of looking for a narrative to write a talk. But before I got into that, I was like, well, I need to find something that I can start stitching things together with. So a lot of the AI stuff was in Hugging Face, so I was learning a little bit of Python in order to interact with the models, but then I needed to stitch everything together when I ran across something that ran on the JVM, something that I was super comfortable with, which was Apache NiFi. So being able to take files and attach them to Python processes and Python code, whether it's from Hugging Face or any of the other models that people are publishing and throwing out there on GitHub, I was able to do that with some of their Python extensions.
So conference-driven development.
Conference-driven development, totally.
That's where it all starts. Every good idea starts at a conference talk, right?
Yep.
And then that led you to a full-time job to get you out of the consulting world.
That's right.
So that's impressive on multiple layers.
That's kind of how it works here, right? That's feels like it's a community over code ApacheCon story that
it really
happens
yes.
very frequently. But through putting the talk together, I was finding bugs. It's the Python extensions in NiFi is new as of 2.0, which is still pre-release. So what we're trying to figure out is how to best integrate Python and Java together. There's a lot you can do with Java and AI, and there's a number of conference talks on all you can do with like Spring AI and a number of projects. Onyx, which focuses on executing inference models and training models in Java or multiple languages for that matter. But when you look at what a lot of data engineers are working with today, because Python has been around and very close to academia for a very long time, many of the libraries are just a little bit more mature in the Python area, where I look at some of the things that you can do in NumPy and PyTorch as far as training and being able to build and run inference on models, and it's like, wow, some of the code that I have to write there versus what I would write if I was doing it in Java, it's very different.
And the users that are using these libraries may also be only familiar with Python.
With Python, exactly. So you have your typical data science that's probably reading scientific papers and looking at the code samples that are available there and saying, oh, here's this Python code. I'm going to copy and paste this and tweak a few hyperparameters or some of the model weights, and I want that to run, but I don't want to learn a new language to have to do that. So really, it's about trying to find a way to get people comfortable and being able to write code in the language they're comfortable they're in, but also be able to take advantage of some of the very powerful features of the JVM, such as being able to scale things up so you can do AI at enterprise scale.
So how is this working under the covers? Is Python running on the JVM? Is it through Graal? Like how is it actually running and executing
Yeah,
the code?
so neither of those two, even though those are the two things that you typically think of first, because running Python through Graal on the JVM was something new introduced through Oracle Labs in the Graal project. But what is used in NiFi is something called Py4j. And Py4j is basically an object proxy framework. So what ends up happening is you have the JVM running, and it starts up a Python process that has bindings to those Java objects. And when you make manipulations on the Python objects that are bound to them, it sends messages over a socket back to the JVM, and it updates the object state in the JVM based on what method was called in Python. So I'm able to operate on the JVM objects by pushing commands serially through a socket, which is local in most cases, and then it goes and updates the state. So I mean, if you're doing things that are very highly concurrent, where you have a lot of contention, not a great solve for that. But for NiFi, where you've got data coming in one way and kind of going in a single direction, or maybe it's being split, you don't really have those concurrency problems, because you'd have maybe another processor that's operating on some completely isolated piece of data. So the data comes in from the JVM, you operate on the flow file that comes through from a prior processor, you manipulate that flow file, which is the data that you're operating on, in Python, and then that can be reserialized into bytes and sent out as a transformed flow file with, it could be your model output, it could be bounding boxes, it could be, hey, get an image where we're drawing the bounding boxes on the image, and that's kind of my demo and my talk, not to get too far ahead. Please still go to the talk. But.
Right. Yeah, well, that's very cool. So in your example, how long is that Python process running? Is it kind of long-lived and manipulating the data as data is streamed through it, or is it? Are you starting lots of Python processes, I guess? Yeah,
so the processes are generally long-lived processes. They accept data off the socket coming in from the JVM. They push data back off the socket back to the JVM. So you don't have to start and stop the processes too infrequently. Now, if something blows up, which happens obviously, right? You can restart them. So they can be managed in a way that they're failure tolerant. Or could scale up in cases where you need more than one process just because you're pushing so much through it. So all of those are kind of managed through the Py4j framework in NiFi. If something is taking too long and times out, naturally you're working over sockets, so timeouts are kind of a thing. You've got to be able to manage those sorts of things and those interactions, but it's a little different than dealing with JNI running things on Graal, because the one thing that you get as a disadvantage when you're trying to run another language on the JVM, and this goes for times when I've tried this with Node.js, times when I've tried this with Python, is it works in the most basic of cases when you're writing purely within that language, but the moment you start taking dependent libraries in, you're going to find that one that has like a native thing that's not supported, or something that's going to break it.
Yeah, and Python has a lot of C bindings, right? A lot of things have C bindings which wouldn't work this way, right?
Which would be very difficult if they work at all, right? With Py4j, you are running an actual Python process with your Python dependencies. You're running Python, and you're just syncing up the object state through these proxies. So you don't have that problem. So if you can install PyTorch, if you can install NumPy on the system that it's running on, it's going to run fine, and then you just need to make sure that the objects that you're interchanging with the JVM are compatible. So if you're talking about a byte array, what language does not support a byte array?
Right.
Very primitive form of interchange there.
Yeah, but this makes a lot of sense. So I haven't done anything with Python and JVM, but this seems very familiar from just a Java web application point of view.
Sure.
You have your Java web application, you have something sitting in front of it, managing there's the socket connection there, and then there's some other process that's running. I mean, there's some other connection that's being made into the server, right? So we've been doing this for years, so this seems very natural. So that's great. At least I think I can understand what's going on anyway. Maybe in a simplistic point of view. Great. So your talk is tomorrow.
Yeah, my talk is tomorrow at 4:50, I believe it is. So I'm usually a closer, so I get to be a closer here.
That's the best slot, right?
Yeah, right. That's the person that you have to finish on, right?
Yeah.
So that's what my talk is. It's tomorrow, and then it's like hop on a plane back to Chicago.
All right. Well, Bob, I appreciate you taking your time and hanging out with me on the Build Propulsion Lab. And good luck tomorrow.
Thank you.
And thanks to everybody. And we'll be here for the rest of the week. See you later.